Welcome to the Risk and Repeat podcast, episode number 240. I'm Rob Wright, Security News Director at Tech Target, and I am here once again with Senior Security News Writer Alex Kalafi. Alex, welcome back.
Thanks, Rob.
How are you doing on this sunny, beautiful Tuesday morning?
Well, the one thing that is a constant in our lives, whether we're at work, whether I'm away on the last bit of paternity leave, no matter what's going on, is that there will be weird Microsoft security news, and we will talk about it.
Yes, we sure will.
Yeah.
So yeah, some new things going on with Microsoft, some old things going on with Microsoft that we wanted to discuss. In your absence, I discussed
Mhm.
the Secure Future Initiative progress report that came out a few weeks ago with our colleague, Beth Pariseau. Beth covers DevOps, DevSecOps, IT ops, and we talked sort of like big picture about what this SFI progress report says about not just where Microsoft is and what it's doing, but sort of the big picture of what does this say about SecOps in today's world and
Hmm.
just some of the hurdles and the challenges that they have. And on one hand, we kind of came to a place where, look, they're making progress. They are doing a lot of things at the same time. They've got a lot more to do. They've got a lot of stuff ahead of them, and they're facing some enormous challenges based on their size, the number of people, the number of systems, some of the metrics, the stats in that SFI progress report about the number of unused apps and tenants and things like that that they eliminated, they removed, deleted, were just eye-popping, quite frankly. You did a recent story for us on sort of opinions of folks in the InfoSec community about the SFI progress report and how they were feeling about it. And what did you find?
Sure. So I'll go back a bit. So this progress report dropped while I was away for a month, and I actually I felt a little bad that I missed it because when I was at Black Hat, I was sort of talking to Microsoft PR. I was like, "Hey, would love a heads up on this," and they did give us a heads up. I think Ariel was briefed on this, if I
Yep,
remember
yep.
right.
Hmm.
So kudos to them because they've been, I would say, way more communicative with press now versus before all this SFI stuff started, which is nice. So I got back and I'm like, hey, let me do a little refresher on what happened. Let me reach out to some folks, see what they think, especially some people who've been fairly critical on Microsoft in the past. And a couple things I want to say about this progress report. If you want like the nitty-gritty, listen to the last episode with Beth and Rob. The first thing is I do think that the reach of this report was not very far outside of our circles. So,
Hmm.
like people who care about security, like whether it's in a professional context or personally or whatever, I think that's where a lot of the attention for this progress report came. So, Microsoft is making all these security moves, but the biggest stories I would say involving Microsoft right now are the recall security update, which we're going to get into, and the I don't know, and then just random political stuff, which I won't get into. But that's what people are talking about. So I almost feel bad because there's a lot of good progress being made in this report that I don't think a ton of people are paying attention to. That was
Hmm.
my first observation. The second observation that I had was that people were overall pretty positive. The folks that did check it out, read it, pay attention. I went to LinkedIn, and I sort of used the search function there to sort of see what some of the hot takes posts were because
Hmm.
LinkedIn for as cringy as it is good if you want to get hot takes on specific situations, things going on. And people were pretty positive on the progress report. Folks that did not work at Microsoft, as far as I know, did not have any professional connection, though who knows. And then I went to X, the Everything app, and then I sort of did some searching there, and people seemed pretty positive and saying this was a good step in the right direction. Not a ton of criticism on the social media side. So I reached out to some people who I've spoke with about Microsoft before to sort of
Hmm.
get their take. And I would say the most notable criticism, or let's say this is good, but they need to do a little better, came from Alex Stamos, who is the Chief Information Security Officer at Sentinel One, former security czar at Facebook, Krebs Stamos Group. He's one of the big names in this industry of ours.
Sure. Yeah.
And he's been pretty critical of Microsoft and their security issues over the past year or two, especially. Um, he called it laudable organizational changes, sort of Microsoft putting good people into good roles and measuring security as part of their review cycle. Um, but he said he hasn't really seen any practical, technical, or transparency improvements yet. Um, he said that one thing he was hoping to see that he hasn't is a detailed technical update and root cause analysis of the Midnight Blizzard breach that Microsoft experienced at the
Hmm.
beginning of this year. And I think that's a very valid point, is that I think broadly Microsoft is making a lot of important changes. They're showing some work. Um, but the Midnight Blizzard breach, I think, is sort of being, well, I can't speak for them. They're not saying this, but it kind of does feel like it's being treated like old news. Like we did everything we needed to. Let's move on to look to the future. And I do understand that from a messaging perspective, thinking about where Microsoft's coming from is like, well, if we're getting rid of all of these old tenants and we're bolstering our security standards for our employee base and eliminating 730,000 unused apps and 5.75 million inactive tenants, maybe that's what we should try to focus on, the good stuff, and maybe let the Midnight Blizzard stuff sort of fade away. But
Yeah.
while I understand their thinking on that, I think I think it's still like a notable piece of the transparency puzzle missing. And then the other thing, which I think you and Beth sort of discussed, and we've been discussing on Slack, is that there's probably still quite a bit of technical debt that Microsoft is going to need to address. For as good as this stuff looks in some ways, it sort of maybe feels like it's scratching the surface. As for 40 years of Microsoft business that needs to be improved,
Yeah. Yeah.
development stuff, old code. I don't know. I can't even begin to imagine. Which is all to say, the takeaway of the people I spoke with and my takeaway was probably pretty similar to um, yours and Beth, which is still work to be done, but this is a pretty good start. To make a short story a little long.
Yeah. No, I think that some of the comments, and I forget who it was in the story. I think a couple people had mentioned this, but just like I think that they were happy with the fact that Microsoft was making structural changes at the top in terms of incentivizing a focus on security and making that a priority, like with policies up top, but that there wasn't enough technical detail about some of the things that have come up before.
Hmm.
Obviously, we still don't know how the threat actors, the Storm 0558 nation state attackers obtained that Microsoft consumer signing key. That's still a mystery. I mean, obviously Microsoft has its theory about what had happened. You know, the key was included in a crash dump, but they don't have evidence to directly support that. So it's still just a theory. We might never know. So I guess I'm sure they're still looking into it. Uh, but yeah, there's an enormous amount of stuff that they've done to this point. So I think even the harshest critics of Microsoft have to feel like, well, they are responding to the CSRB report. They are responding to these incidents. It may not be everything that you like. It may not be exactly in the way that you think it should be done, but they're moving in that direction. So I think they deserve credit. I mean,
Hmm.
there's enormous challenges like we have discussed on this pod and other pods as well. Just the amount of technical debt that they're probably facing, the number of employees, the account credentials. It's just kind of staggering. I think in this progress report, you got a clear sense of what they wanted, like the priority areas that they wanted to focus on, identity and access management being one of them. So that's good. That's really good. Uh, now, is it going to hold through the next progress report? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe.
Yeah. It's this is an ongoing thing. They're gonna have continuing progress reports.
Yep.
It's sort of like I they're a giant company, so you never know how much benefit of the doubt to give them, but
Right.
it's which it actually that makes responding to this in general, because it's like if Microsoft was a startup, I don't know, you'd be a lot kinder to them just naturally because they're not like the most well-resourced, one of the most well-resourced businesses in
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
Um, so there's always that part of you that's like, well, la-di-da, you should have did this originally. But on the other hand, it's like there are good individual people writing this report, advocating to make sure this information reaches the public, even if only a few people see it, working to make Microsoft more transparent. And like I do appreciate the fact that that work is being done too. So it's a little confusing to sort of put it in my sort of feelings
Yeah.
slots, I guess. Um
That's fair.
yeah.
And one of the things you mentioned, just this idea of some of these things, yes, you do feel like they should have maybe been done earlier. And I don't want to harp on this too much. I talked about principle of least privilege and reducing permissions and admin accounts and things like that. I mentioned that on the pod with Beth, how that seems to have gotten away from Microsoft in years past, that this is something they weren't doing, even though you hear about that principle all the time.
Hmm.
One of the other things I think is interesting that will sort of transition us to the next point is there was a real focus in this report about monitoring and detecting threats, specifically this idea of using or enforcing that all production infrastructure and services, et cetera, are adopting standard libraries for logs, for security logs, for audit logs. And I thought to myself, like when I was reading that, like, why, like, is that something that they weren't already doing? It seems like that's really important, that that's something that should have been enforced and implemented long ago, but clearly was not. So good on them for admitting it and putting it in there and being transparent about it, that they are expanding this and that they are working to making sure, like I think they said, um, the vast majority of their infrastructure now is, uses these standard libraries for audits and security logs. That's good. But then there's this report that came out a few days ago from Business Insider. The headline
Hmm.
here, I think it was October 4th. The headline here is Microsoft tells customers it lost log data for key security products. Okay, that's not good. The story goes on to say that I guess the reporter in question here uh, got a hold of customer notifications that informed clients that a bug in one of Microsoft's internal monitoring agents resulted in a malfunction in some of the agents when uploading log data to our internal logging platform, end quote. And this occurred between, I guess, September 2nd and September 19th. So not like a big window, it's just a couple weeks, but it's some pretty important products and services. Microsoft Entra, the identity and access management service, formerly Azure Active Directory, and then Microsoft Sentinel, security information and event management product, which is pretty important. And then also, I think Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Purview. I mean, these are important things. And so, not mentioned in this article, but that I found very concerning as I was reading through this was this idea of how did Microsoft come to figure out that there was a bug and that they were missing log data? I'm guessing, Alex, that it was because a customer or two, maybe several, had some type of incident.
Hmm.
God forbid it was a breach or a major attack, went to Microsoft to get this log data and then found that it was missing. So
Hmm.
that's not good. That's not good. And we don't know at this point what kind of bug it was. We don't know the entire list of affected services and products and whatnot. It could be more, who knows? I believe you contacted Microsoft about this, but I'm guessing we have
Yeah.
not heard anything back.
Yeah, I think my guess is they'll tell me something, maybe, but uh yeah, I this is a weird one, right? Because what you
Yeah,
described is the worst case scenario is Microsoft promised all this logging data and then someone got hit with a breach or an attack of some kind and then the logs weren't there to support it. I don't know if that would be like a legal issue or what the consequences of that could be. The thing you hope happened is that no one was breached in this way,
yep,
and or whatever relevant customers were affected by this, and someone who was doing their due diligence and making sure and like checking logs or whatever is maybe they should be doing. Was like, oh, this is not consistent data. Microsoft, what do you think of this? Oh, looks like this wasn't working right, and then everyone figures it out, and it's all better. But that's also as wishful thinking positively as yours is like pessimistic thinking negatively, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Like I have no idea whether this is the best or the worst case situation.
yeah,
Um, I think we'll eventually find out though.
yeah. I mean, there's a scenario where I think it was probably a customer or several customers that informed Microsoft that they weren't getting their log data. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's the most likely scenario. But it could just be one of those scenarios where they went to check on something somewhat innocuous, found the data was not there, asked Microsoft about it, and they looked into it and discovered that you know, that there was a bug and they fixed it. And yeah, there's a gap, but it's not something, it wasn't spurred by a catastrophic attack or breach or federal government customer, being attacked or compromised or anything like that. So there is that possibility uh,
Hmm.
that it's just, like I said, just routine sort of check for log data, maybe some suspicious activity or anomalies or whatever, and then, oh, whoops, can't access it. And Microsoft goes and fixes it. That's good. I mean, but to have the log data be one of the focal points of the SFI and have this come on the heels of that report. I don't know. It's not a terrible look, but it's not a great one either.
Mm,
And you just wonder, it's tough to say how damaging that 2 week gap or whatever really is for organizations, but man, like if you're investigating something, if you're incident response and you think you may have had some type of malicious activity going on, and you can't get that log data, you can't get your Sentinel data, you can't get your Entra. Y- I mean, I got to imagine that's going to make it pretty hard for forensic investigators and incident response teams. So, fingers crossed that that's not the case.
hmm
Uh, Lastly, we should talk about, you were also gone for this, Microsoft's recall feature. It's
Yep.
coming, Alex, next month.
It always was. They spent too much money on OpenAI in this. I think people who
Yep.
thought that this wasn't going to come back at all were thinking a little wishfully.
Well, Microsoft announced that they have implemented a number of changes, uh, security enhancements, whatever you want to call it, to address a lot of the concerns that InfoSec folks had, privacy advocates have about the product. The biggest thing to me that stands out is that they've given customers the ability to remove the feature entirely.
hmm
I mean, that's what it
Opt-in,
says.
she calls, or Microsoft calls it.
Yeah, it's opt-in, but there's also a feature that looks like you can just remove it. Like,
hmm
so there's no, accidental enablement, I guess. So there's other things in here as well. Some some higher level security features to, I guess, make sure that the data doesn't just like leak out. So you don't have like a keylogger feature just spewing data out there that, a threat actor may be able to access. What'd you think of this? What you think it's going to be enough, or are we going to be back to square one when this comes out next month?
Couple random thoughts. The first is the idea of calling recall an opt-in experience is, I think, a step in the right direction, but my gaming PC runs Windows, I don't know, 10 probably,
Yep, yep,
and every 4 times, 5 times I turn on my computer, Microsoft takes me through that, hey, let's finish setting up your PC.
yes, yep,
And they like try to trick me. And I will use the word trick here. As a journalist, I will use the word trick. They try to trick me into using Microsoft Edge as my default web browser.
yep,
Oh, you should this is the best way to use your internet. You should do web browsing with our recommended settings. And in
yep,
parentheses, recommended. And then it just changes your web browser to Edge. And so that's the Microsoft I know when I think of opt-in as a concept. So I'm pretty pessimistic about the idea of the user always being in control. By which I mean it is legally true,
right.
but it is but I'll believe it when I see it is sort of
Hmm.
in practical real life meaning. Um Sensitive data in recall is encrypted and the keys are protected. Okay, like that's good. Um, I think there are going to be a lot of people who turn recall on who don't need it,
Yeah,
and it just I don't know. I guess my thing is I will never use the recall service. Um, and I don't think it's very interesting to me. But if you think this is cool, like you meaning a listener, and you think it could improve your life and make you do whatever more efficiently, I mean, good thing people raised a stink because this is a way better version of it than y'all were gonna get a few months ago.
yeah,
I guess that's sort of it. It's like I don't think it's good, but if you do think it's good, this is a way better version of it, and I think that's at least semi pleasing. I don't know.
I think that is a fair point to make that they once again showed that they're responding to concerns or
Hmm.
issues that people have flagged. And I think that that's good. And
Mm.
they took the time to update some things, add some things, uh, isolation, enclaves, protecting the data. I mean, that's really what this is all about. You don't want the user snapshots, all this data to just be available in a way that uh, would allow a threat actor to access it if they, God forbid, got on your laptop somehow.
Mm.
Uh, the thing that is a little concerning to me, well, two things. Big picture, yeah, they're moving ahead with this is just still a red flag for a lot of people that are kind of like no one was really asking for this type of product, so why do it, right? But the other thing is, this is such a new type of thing, a new feature that I still get the feeling that they haven't totally thought through how this could impact security for the user. And one of the things that stood out to me in the report was they said that a third-party security vendor was engaged to perform an independent security design review and penetration test, end quote. That's good. But number one, who? And number two, what they say.
Yeah.
If it's a big firm and they say, look, we hammered away at this for months. We don't think the attack surface is very broad. You would have to do X, Y, and Z to access this data, and still then it's encrypted and so on and so forth. Whatever. But we don't have that information, so it makes me a little nervous that there could be some users out there going into this who enable this feature and don't know that it is kind of adding to the attack surface, even if it's just a
Yep.
small bit.
Hmm.
And what I'm really going to be fascinated by is what are the corporate users going to do? Are they going to sit here and say, let's just try it out, or are there going to be policies that a lot of, like, let's say financial institutions who are just like delete, 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 like get rid of it across the board? We'll see. So again, it's, back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, a step in the right direction, but not totally what you want, and still major concerns and challenges ahead for them, I think is the best way to summarize it.
Yeah, I think that's a fine summary. And if Microsoft was encapsulated into one person and they were listening to our discussion of this right now and what should their takeaway be? I would almost hope you would be heartened that this is the feedback that you're getting because I mean there are still plenty of frustrating things about Microsoft, including hey, their multi-billion dollar investment in AI and what has sort of come out of that being
Yeah,
part of it.
yeah,
Um, but I've also rarely been less frustrated at Microsoft in the 5 years I've been doing it. Like it's for as much negative stuff as we said today or critical stuff, whatever you want to say. I had almost as much nice stuff to say too, like or optimistic things. So I
maybe more.
guess keep up the good part of your work. Keep it up, right?
Yeah,
So I guess that's sort of how I would say it is. Even if it sounds like a mixed bag compared to where it was, it's very positive.
right. It's a start. It's a
Yeah,
start
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yep.
Well, we can end it there for now. I'm sure we're going to be talking more about the SFI journey and new updates and additional progress reports as this goes on. But
Hmm.
Alex, thank you for chatting with me today about this topic. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you to the readers and listeners of Tech Target and the Risk and Repeat podcast. I'm Rob Wright, and we'll see you next time.